All right, let's do it live on a Tuesday edition of Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. I am merely Bo. He is the great Gibbe, and he is the great Z. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, brother. How are you today?
I'm doing real well. I have to take umbrage with Gibbe's rundown right away because the first bullet point I see is NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero reporting the deal on Josh Dobbs back to home. He's back here.
Sure.
I believe we reported that last week here on the program, Gibbe. I mean, did we have this, Z?
I mean, we didn't necessarily. I don't know about report, but I will back you, and I will say that we certainly.
I feel like
of course you were going to back him. Why wouldn't you?
Of course.
You two back.
Yeah, because
each other
we're a team. Except when
Watch yourself.
He's a corrupt judge. Except when he's a corrupt judge.
Only once. Let's speak easy.
Okay, fine.
Minimal corruption, honestly.
As Nano would say, first time bitten by snakes, second time afraid of lizards. So I'm watching. We did talk about it. It seemed to make sense that Josh Dobbs would be a logical guy. And then the other name that's in the news for the Browns, Marquise Goodwin, is somebody, maybe that was 2 weeks ago. Even.
Yeah.
We mentioned Marquise Goodwin on this program as a potential speed receiver for the Cleveland Browns. And he's not as much of the horizontal threat that McCole Hardman is, but he is a better deep threat than McCole Hardman is in terms of being a route runner as a wide receiver. So that could ultimately be the direction they go. I don't think he's as complete, but if they're looking for a one-trick pony, he's very good at his one trick. But yeah, if you pay attention to the scores,
it's all
brother,
here for you, kids.
You get it.
What the hell do you want, man? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that. So Goodwin's 32. He'll be 33 next season. I think he would be. I don't know. You could correct. And you will if I'm wrong on this. I don't know that he would preclude anything else from happening.
In fact, I think that he would be insurance. Put it this way. The Browns are in a position now where it feels like pick 42 is going to go one of two ways, at least in my mind. Right now, which would be defensive line and probably more likely than not edge at 42. If they don't trade out of it. I think it's probably very likely they trade out of it as well. And then the other way they could go would be wide receiver. And I do think that even if you were to get a Marquise Goodwin, that does not preclude you from drafting, or even a McCole Hardman. That does not preclude you in any way, shape, or form from drafting somebody at 42 that you think can be somebody of consequence. The reality of the situation is, number one, weapons, as you say every day.
Weapons. Give me all of them. Give me Goodwin and Hardman. Let's go.
Goodwin, Hardman, and somebody at 42. Fine. All the weapons.
All of them.
But the reality is we have to be – let's say it is Goodwin. You mentioned he's 32. Amari is certainly he's either at the apex or he's on the downside of his apex, right? And he's elite. But you've got to have some succession planning in place. Donovan Peoples-Jones last year earned one of the biggest performance bonuses in the NFL. Over $700,000, and it was well-deserved. That also bumped his salary up this year to nearly $3 million, even though he was a sixth-round pick because he played so well a year ago. And then he's going to be in the last year of his rookie deal this year. So you have extending Donovan Peoples-Jones, decisions on Amari Cooper at $20 million. That doesn't even matter if you sign a Hardman, sign a Marquise Goodwin. You need to have, I think, a young talent that's on a rookie deal ready to play snaps of consequence on this football team any way you look at it. So 42 makes sense. People could say, hey, that's going to be David Bell. It's going to be David Bell. That's fine, and I would love to see David Bell take a massive step forward. I still think David Bell's ceiling in this league is like a possession-y slot receiver.
Yeah.
Not somebody that it would be game planned against per se.
Yeah, I agree. As you just outlined it there, that's why, we say weapons all the time. Like, they got to get some bodies in that stable because, Amari will be 29 this June. So that's just the reality of it. There needs to be some young weapons in the mix here. And whether that's in you have two things you're doing. It's a two-pronged attack. Number one, you need a weapon right now that can take the top off the top of the defense or someone who can stretch a defense and stress a defense horizontally. We keep coming back to Hardman. Goodwin would have that type of ability, obviously, as well. But you also need an up-and-comer in that room.
Yes.
In a big way. Like somebody who's got an NFL future that can eventually become a 1A, a 1, whatever. Like that needs to be there. You need a dynamic playmaker because, quite frankly, that's what the rest of the teams that you're competing against have or are drafting to have. Look what Kansas City did last year in their draft. They lost Tyreek Hill. Now, they always still had Kelsey, and that's obviously a pretty good thing to have. But if you just go look at what they did in the draft from a weapon standpoint, they attacked it every way you could.
Yep.
And that's what you have to do.
Offensively and defensively at premium positions. That's exactly what they did. And, you're able to do that when you have that star quarterback that kind of makes everything, the sum of the parts, great, the whole greater than the sum of the parts, which is certainly what they've got in Patrick Mahomes and what the Cleveland Browns are definitely hoping that they've got in Deshaun Watson. So as you look at kind of Marquise Goodwin, you look at his stats for his career, he is somebody that is a proven vertical threat, but as you pointed out, has been in the league since 2013. I mean, he is a speedy guy. 2 years ago, 16 yards a catch. Last year, over 14 and 3 touchdowns for Seattle. Played a nice role and actually had some nice games with the Seattle Seahawks a year ago with Geno Smith as a part of kind of, his resurrection. But you look at his yards per catch the last 5 seasons, 17.2, 17.2, 15.5, 15.7, 14.3 for his career at 16.2. This is somebody that knows how to make big plays. And we've got, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones has proven he knows how to make big plays. So does Amari. But just, again, slightly different. Smaller, 5'9", and a guy that can fly. But to your point, you look at 42, and so when I think of pick 42, and I'm going to kind of take this from a step back and even let's think about it like we're Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta and Kevin Stefanski. There are 3 positions, because we don't need a quarterback. There are 3 positions, and I don't think we're spending 42 on a left tackle, so we can take that out.
Yep.
There are 3 possible positions that you could spend this pick on. And the reason that I say these are the 3 possible positions, we're going to get into money in a second. So wide receiver and then defensive line, both positions. Now, the likelihood of finding a stud pass rushing defensive tackle at 42, given that that's what everybody looks like, probably seems slim. But listen, the great players slip through the draft all the time.
Yep.
This is a very, very deep edge class. Do you believe that Alex Wright is the long-term solution? Do you believe that Obo Okoronkwo is a long-term solution? And maybe he is, but he's down the road a little bit in his career. If you hit at 42 on one of those 3 positions, we'll call it a pass rushing defensive tackle, an edge rusher, a double-digit sack guy, or a playmaking wide receiver, you are for 4 years, getting somebody who is going to command on the open market $20 million plus a year on a rookie contract. So the net gain to your organization with your premium pick at 42 is maximized by drafting at those positions and hoping that you hit. And even if it's a pretty good player at that position, it's still a significant cap savings. That's not really true anywhere else. Tackle would be the other one, and quarterback, but we have a quarterback.
Yep.
So that's, to me, where it makes the most sense that's where our first pick would ultimately end up going. And if you were to look at their track record so far, their quote-unquote premium picks have gone to tackle, cornerback has been the first pick taken in 2 of their drafts, and tackle was the other.
Yep.
So it just feels like that's where this thing has to go. You look at this receiver class, there are guys people like Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, Scott from Cincinnati, Downs from North Carolina, who's somebody I think is more intriguing as this process goes on. But that's where I think it's going to have to live, in one of those spots. And to your point, in terms of acquiring weapons, accumulating weapons, and rounding this football team out and building not only for this year, because your window is now, as you pointed out, but next year, and trying to figure out how you can stay in that window. I think getting a premium pass catcher is important, which is why there's talk of 42 and something for a Jerry Jeudy.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think you're at a position, as we sit right now, you put on that hat of those guys and you say, if the draft happens tomorrow, you're in a position, if you don't trade out of 42, if that doesn't happen, then you take the best. You're not going to take a corner. You have a ton of guys at that position,
yes.
but you're taking the best available wide receiver or defensive end in that spot. That most to likely. Me feels like the layup that has to happen. and then you need to hit on it in a very big way. But you do need to have some succession planning at both of those positions and some, ancillary help at those positions to come in right away and be effective. That's necessary, man. So that's kind of where you're at. And to your point, I don't think that they will be, cornered in or boxed in with either. I think you could pick whichever one fits best.
Yep.
Whoever you have graded higher of those two positions at 42, you just take them, provided you don't trade it. I would be a big fan of a Jerry Jeudy trade. I think there's high value in something like that. Now, you're going to have to pay him sooner rather than later, of course.
Well, that would be to me, to that point, if you go with Jerry Jeudy, what you're saying is we're going to run out 1 year of Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah.
And then next year, that would probably mean this is the last season of Amari Cooper with the Cleveland Browns. But you would have gotten, hopefully, 2 great years out of him. But I think that's what that would mean, and you would reallocate that money into Jerry Jeudy and so on and so forth. But go on. I think you're exactly right.
No, but I just that's what I'm for. I just that's the point I was making is if you could find a way to do that deal, a player and 42 for Jeudy. Now all the reporting has been a 1 is the jumping off point for Denver, but it doesn't appear that there are any takers for that 1, which is probably how it got leaked out.
Yep.
So a 2 and a player for Jeudy, sign me up for. You'd be getting a tremendous value. As I mentioned, you'd have to pay him, and potentially it would mean the end of Amari Cooper. But you're getting a guy who's, 24?
Yep.
Who was
24.
Who was a high ceiling prospect and has delivered at a high rate without having outstanding quarterback play. So to me, that feels like a home run. Like, give me that guy, because what you need is you're in the Deshaun Watson business for now and for the next decade. You have to this is going to be the task of Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, Paul DePodesta, everyone who's kind of orchestrating this over the next 10 years of Deshaun Watson's career. You have got to continually put weapons around him so that the exact same thing that Joe Burrow said about Cincinnati last season, when he said the championship window is my career. The championship window, when you have a quarterback of this nature, is their career. And it is your job to consistently put enough weapons around them so that he can go to war against guys like Burrow and Mahomes and Herbert. That's the job.
Yep.
So there's no such thing as too much weapons. Like, all of them. Get them all. You
all of them.
That's where you're at. So
you're right, and
it sucks, right? See, real quick, it sucks because it's the reality, and you got to just own it. But if you're in the NFC, it's not like this.
No,
it's not.
No. In the NFC, we're right
one of the
now,
teams.
Third best team in the NFC, fourth best team in the NFC.
Yeah,
certainly considered a playoff lock.
Yes.
If we're in the South or the North, we're likely the favorites in those divisions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it is. And and the Niners are what they are, even without even knowing who the heck is playing quarterback for them. Mm-hmm. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, take Cincinnati, for example. Cincinnati's got Jamar Chase was 6th overall. Higgins was the first pick of the second round. Tyler Boyd back in the day was a second-round pick. Joe Mixon was a second-round pick. Hayden Hurst, who's no longer with them, was a second-round pick. And it's likely that they will replace him with a tight end in either the first or the second round this year. There's some guy that keeps getting linked to them that I read that the thing that I read about him was, and I don't remember his name off the top of my head because I'm not looking at tight ends for us, but was that it would be like just dropping, Dallas Clark into this offense. No thanks.
No.
Is
it the kid from Notre Dame, Michael Mayer?
I don't know, but they're like he's like a Dallas. He's like putting Dallas Clark into the Bengals offense.
Nope.
No thanks.
Nope.
Didn't need that. But I mean, then you go and you look. Let's take like the Chargers for example. We'll see what happens with Eckler, but, Mike Williams, an early pick. Keenan Allen, an early pick and a perennial Pro Bowler. You go to the Bills. They traded for Stephon Diggs, who was a former first-round pick.
Yeah.
They're interested in acquiring more weapons. They feel like they need to. They've been using early picks at running back every single year to try to get somebody to go there. With the Chiefs, you can say Tyreek Hill was picked where he was, and that is true. But, I mean, the guy had been an all-pro every single year. Kelsey's the greatest tight end, arguably as a pass catcher, certainly of all time. And then they still use early picks on running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Didn't pan out, but they use early picks on Sky Moore. They bring in Juju Smith-Schuster, a former early pick. So they're trying to do all the things. Always. It's always about weapon, accumulation. And then I'm trying to think, Jacksonville. Big free agent signing Christian Kirk, who was an early pick. Calvin Ridley. Evan Ingram was a former first-round pick. Travis Etienne's a former first-round pick. Skill, talent, offense, explosion. That's what this league is about, very much so. And even the Jets, Breece Hall, early pick. Elijah Moore, second-round pick. Garrett Wilson, first-round pick. Corey Davis, who's still technically on their roster, former first-round pick. Like, this is not – it is about premium talent, those positions. And there are teams that are fortunate, and, you find it, and every now and then you find an Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round like the Lions did, and then you say, oh, we're still going to put a first-round pick with him in Jamison Williams, who didn't even really get to play, and we're going to keep loading it up. And we're going to bring in, talented guys like David Montgomery. We're going to give away T.J. Hawkinson, still befuddles the rock.
Crazy.
But we're going to do we're going to give Jared Goff as the best opportunity that he has to succeed. And they could use one of their early picks on another playmaker this year. Like, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they?
Of course they would. Yeah. It's the price of doing business.
It's what it is.
It's just what it is. So, I think this is I think Goodwin would be a fascinating thing. I don't think that would be the end of it. It shouldn't be the end of it. No. It should be something that is continually pursued. I love having Dobbs back. He was awesome. Awesome human. Really was a really good player. You think about stabilizing, just a friendly voice, all of it. I mean, the Dobbs returning is a home run, and we didn't get into that too much, but it's I'm about as big a fan of that as it could be.
Me too. And for $2 million, why wouldn't you have somebody who knows the system? He's well-liked and respected in the locker room. And as we've said many times, look, there wasn't anybody out there per se that had things gone. If Deshaun were to, get Tom Brady'd an early season injury, like, it's going to be very difficult for us. Jacoby Brissett played out of that price range, and obviously so he did, and deservedly so, and he's going to get a chance, I think, to start with Washington, or at least compete for that job there with Howell. But there isn't, we're going to go as Deshaun goes, and so to me the whole goal is how do we create an organization that is putting him and this offense in the best place to succeed in the year 2023. And we talked about some of the things that are contrarian to that are a part of who we are right now, paying 2 guards and a running back. That is not it's not who we'll be in 4 years.
No.
3 years, 2 years maybe not even 1 year. I don't know, but that's not who we're going to be long term.
It's one of those things where you try explaining that to people, like we love all 3 of those guys, and all 3 of those guys were just so good that they demanded the contracts that they got. But if you were building it, that's not the way you'd build it.
No, and they would. I think that would be the first thing they would say is 3 of our top 6 salary cap hits are going to be guards and a running back. No, not a chance.
Yeah,
not a chance. But that's just the way that it's worked out. And, I think that is why there are people, and certainly we would not do that on this program, and you want to have by the way, Batonio, I think 4 or 5 straight Pro Bowls, Nick Chubb 4 straight Pro Bowls, Wyatt Teller 2 straight Pro Bowls. Like, they're players of great consequence.
Sure they are.
And that's why you're not letting them walk out the door. But at some point, you are not going to be able to have every luxury that you want on this football team, especially with your quarterback and what his salary is, that you are going to have to make decisions and then lean on the coaching of a Stump Mitchell, or just the fact that this offense tends to produce successful running backs everywhere.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop. And that Bill Callahan is a guy who it feels like can produce successful guard play out of anybody. Mm-hmm. That's something that you're going to have to wrestle with as this goes on, and you're dealing with the situation that you have now that you have a franchise quarterback. When you have a franchise quarterback, you don't get to have everything. It's just that's the way that it is. Yep. That's the way the salary structures work. When you're on a rookie quarterback contract, you can try to load up everything, but we can't do that. And so there will be hard decisions that have to be made in the next 18 months about that and how we're going to structure it to do what you and I think makes a lot of sense, which is weapons.
That's
And
right.
honestly, those weapons typically center around the passing game, because if you can throw it effectively, you're always going to be able to run it. Miles Sanders last year averaged 5 yards a carry in Philly, double-digit touchdowns over 1,000 yards, and they're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. We'll bring in Rashad
Right.
Penny because he's going to be cheaper than you, and we'll draft somebody, and we're going to get that same production anyway.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's the Pacheco with Kansas City, 7th round pick.
Right.
Like that's
Tony
that's the way that
Pollard
works. Yeah.
sent Zeke Elliott out of town. I mean, every year there are running backs, and when you have a system like ours that is so running back friendly, and I'm trying to rack my brain, but when's the last time a team did anything of consequence with a running back on a second contract? A premium
probably have to a premium. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like
Seattle, Marshawn Lynch. Long time ago.
Potentially, I don't know. Maybe Corey Dillon with the Patriots. I mean, that's 15, 20 years ago.
There are people listening to this show who don't even know who Corey Dillon is.
Fact. Yeah. Jerome Bettis with the Steelers. Like, that's a different world. At that.
But it's not
time.
that
it's
anymore.
Not,
and that's the thing. Like,
you got to throw it, and you got to score. You got to score in the 30s. You said this a couple years ago, and it was so spot on. You've got to throw it when the other team knows you're going to throw it, and in order to do that, that means whether you're trying to accumulate points in a game or you're chasing a game. In order to do that, you have to have the franchise dude quarterback if you want to win at the highest level. We have that, but you also need the weapons. And you're not going to run the ball 35 times. Now everybody here wants to run it. Okay, but there's a ceiling to that, and it doesn't include hoisting the Lombardi, and that's the objective. And if it's not, then what are you doing?
Of everybody who's of age listening to this show, right? And people then they're certainly older. So let's say anybody whose main point of reference in the NFL is, let's call it, the last 15 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And the game has evolved immensely in the last 15 years. But we said Marshawn Lynch. So the best running backs that anybody's seen in that period, Adrian Peterson, pretty sure never played in a Super Bowl.
No.
Was the league's MVP. Mm-hmm. Maybe the closest he ever got was with Favre.
Yeah, they got to a championship game when he threw the bad pick in New Orleans. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think he was on that team.
So Marshawn, but then of recent memory, like everybody
Henry,
knows how
Gurley,
Derrick Henry's great.
Zeke, like those are the guys.
Nothing. Gurley with the Rams made it 1 year, right?
He made it 1 year when he was still
but
at
he
his
was already
apex,
a shell of him.
Yeah, because the year they lost, he was still. The year they lost
if he was still good then.
He might not have been. He was like a comet. It was like 4 years.
Yeah.
And then done.
Yeah. Yep. Dalvin Cook has been consistently great.
Mm-hmm.
All the names people know from fantasy, right? Like
that's it. It's all fantasy guys.
But those people haven't played for anything of consequence.
No. And quite frankly, you could maybe make an argument that you could do it that way in the NFC. You can't do it that way in the AFC. Can't. You could try to make an argument that you could go run heavy because Philly did that and San Francisco does that. But those are also two of the most diverse attacks in the league. It's not just out of the run. It's everything horizontal, let alone vertical. So
yeah,
but it's at least in the NFC you could say, okay, there's a path for that, a roadmap for it. There isn't in the AFC. And when you acquire Deshaun Watson, that's when that roadmap changes.
Well, here's the thing. If you're ever in a situation where your, let's say, fan base or your team, fan base wants or your team, in fact, is better off in important moments taking the ball out of your quarterback's hands, you're not winning the Super Bowl.
No.
So if you want to turn around and hand it to Derrick Henry, or you want to turn around and hand it to Nick Chubb when you need 4 yards in critical situations, you're not winning the Super Bowl.
No.
You have to be a team that wants your quarterback making the plays that matter and deciding outcomes.
Mm-hmm. How's your internet? How's your internet at your house?
I think okay. Why?
Because it's terrible here. Is yours terrible, Gibby? You're not on.
Gibby was frozen for a long time. You've been fine the whole time.
Yeah. Now are you on, Gibby?
No.
I mean, that was a pastrami sandwich of content right there for the people that we just gave them. I mean, that was unbelievable. And I was trying to look up some of the stats to back up some of the comments on some of the positions.
Are you on the new Wi-Fi?
I mean, I think so. And it just is so. No, I'm on. It's just slow. Just inching along.
I had to put in 7 different password username combinations yesterday to activate stuff because while I was gone there was a Google update that came through.
Oh, there you go.
I'm like, can we just get one for everything?
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
No.
All right. Yeah. Well, at least it's good. I mean, that you give the people all you want with that open.
I know. Yeah, and I screwed it up when you came to me because I didn't know how to turn on the on-off and
you said
buttons.
it. You said it, brother. A light. When you get how are your designs for this studio coming? The ones that you submitted.
When I hear, I'll let you know.
I'd like you to submit some designs. I'd like it to incur.
Yeah, Yellowstone's helped me out on that.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, we've got bodies that can come in and set it up the way we need to.
Yeah.
It's the dollar figures and all that stuff.
Fortunately, when you were gone, they cared about my safety, and they fixed my cord that had been there for forever.
I heard you had an issue last week. I was real sad about that.
Blue flames, Gibbe. Illuminated his face.
Yeah.
Probably
came out of that little hole. Blue flame.
It's a godlike figure. It just illuminated his face as if he was.
And then you know what happened?
A greater power.
A young man with some real chutzpah, a young man by the name of Tequila Fila said, "I love you, NZ. Not letting this happen to you. You're not going to get burned up on my watch. New cord. No more problems."
No.
I threw the cord out yesterday. I thought about plugging it back in.
Nana was convinced that you were out to get me. She didn't realize it was as simple as a cord, and she's like, "Well, Gibbe didn't just change the cord. Maybe he wanted to off."
Nana, I was well underway at doing other things. I was nowhere near this studio. I can assure you.
You're not. So that we got that sorted out, so that's a win. All right, lots to get to. We have Z for the next half hour of this program, and then he's off to do more important things. We have around the league that we will get to, some quarterback news there, some winners and losers through the first week of free agency. The general, John McLean, will join us in the 2 o'clock hour of the program, a little better or worse in the second hour as well. We're off and running on Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. If a car, truck, or motorcycle accident caused you injury, call the injury lawyers at 1-800-ELK, Ohio for a free case review. Elk & Elk's proud partner of your Cleveland Browns as we go around the league. Stephen Holder with ESPN saying the Colts have not ruled out making a run for Lamar Jackson. I also saw Stephen A. Smith here in the last hour saying that his belief is that it is so deteriorated between Lamar and the Ravens that there is no way that he would represent the franchise again. A lot of smoke, man.
I mean, to me, that feels a little bit more like an ember. That feels a little bit more like fire. Like that's Screaming A likes to go ahead and make grandiose statements, but I do think that he's probably not making something that definitive of a statement out of thin air.
He would have, I think, it properly sourced in some way. I don't think that I agree with you. I don't see a scenario where it's just made up. The other one that I think could be interesting, so the Dolphins picked up Tua's option yesterday, and I wouldn't know if Baltimore would have any interest in that or not, but they could that would not – one thing about that, it does not mean that Miami couldn't also be interested in Lamar. Like they could include Tua in the deal. It'd have to be a sign and trade deal. It would not be just Miami claiming him and then trying to do it that way through the tag because Miami can't be involved in that anyway. They don't have a first-round pick. But it could be a situation where they had a deal worked out where he does an extension with Baltimore and then it's essentially a sign and trade to Miami. So that's something that could happen, too, at this point. The crazy thing with him is that we don't really have much of anything ever because it's just him now interviewing teams or teams interviewing him. So when you see these reports from Holder saying the Colts have not ruled out making a run for Lamar Jackson, how do you even do it? Do you say, hey, Lamar, we're interested, and then do you call Baltimore and say, what would it take? You sign him to an extension, and then let's work out a deal? Because the last thing you want to do is do all this legwork and then have Baltimore just match it.
Well,
go ahead.
That's the whole thing, right? So the reason that they do this tag is that they say, oh, you think this is your market. Go ahead. We're going to let somebody else set the market, and then we're going to keep you, right? You think that this is what it is, we're going to see. So there are two flip sides of it. One side is, why would I as another team go down this road unless I know for sure they're not going to match it, to your point? Or two, the other side is for Lamar, can I get somebody to give me an offer I know they won't match? His leverage ultimately comes down to, I refuse to play for the Baltimore Ravens. Mm-hmm. He needs to say that and be willing to give up $30+ million in 1 year to do it, for there to be a high likelihood that he is able to go.
So this story pops up from Pro Football Talking Mike Florio a couple hours ago. Ravens QB Lamar Jackson free to speak with other teams. He currently isn't, but someone on his behalf has. Per multiple sources, a rep for Jackson has contacted more than one team in an effort to spark negotiations aimed at a possible offer sheet, but the representative is not certified by the NFL Players Association. Another source said the rep is telling other teams Lamar is ready to move on from the Ravens. As one source explained it, the person has said Jackson does not want a fully guaranteed contract. This is just weird. And meanwhile, the NFLPA is... Last year, the NFL specifically instructed teams not to negotiate with reps not certified by the NFLPA. Clubs are reminded that under Article 48 of the NFL Collective Bargaining Agreement, player contracts may only be negotiated with the player if he is acting on his own behalf or with the player's NFLPA certified agent. Like, he's screwing this up more.
It's just I'll give Baltimore credit for this. Obviously, this much I think you can say based on just how we got to this point. They are very clearly comfortable moving off of him one way or another.
But what's the plan?
Well, I don't know that, but I think it's very clear they're at the point where, sure, we'll have him back at a price that we're willing to pay at a market that will be set by the league, or we're also very clear that we're okay moving in another direction. So, because you wouldn't get to this point if you weren't.
Correct.
We're too far down the road now with this thing. And when they gave him the tag they gave him, it opened all of this up. And I think the wound is pretty fresh now.
There's no doubt. It just changes what's their outlook, what's their future, who's their quarterback.
Well, that's why you mentioned this with Fields a couple months ago before it seemed like the Bears were now they're more locked into Fields, but like would that have been a spot? That's why I mentioned even the Tua thing in Miami. Like, would they do something where, hey, let's do a 1 and Tua, we'll do a contract, a sign and trade with Lamar. You give us a 1 next year in Tua, and you can have Lamar Jackson and put him on that roster with all those weapons. I mean, is that what they're thinking? It could. I don't know. It just feels like they are very comfortable moving off of him. It's amazing how that thing went so south because he was as beloved there as anybody and as big of a part of everything they do as anyone ever's been, including Ray Lewis for a certain moment, and then it just all evaporated.
Correct. And he is, in many ways, to their operation, at least the way that they've operated, and maybe they say we don't want to operate the way we have. That's what I'm wondering. But he was by far the most valuable player maybe in the league to his one team. When you're worth 10 points a game, like that's unheard of.
Yeah.
That's T.J. Watt with the Steelers' defense is 8 points a game. I mean, those are two of the most staggering figures I've ever seen. So maybe they're saying we don't want to operate that way to the point that we were making earlier. Take it full circle. We're not going to be able to compete with Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, Lawrence, Watson with an offense built around a quarterback who's not a great thrower but is the most dynamic runner and overall package in the league because, number one, we can't get receivers to come here. We have to draft them, and frankly, as their general manager pointed out, we haven't been very good at that. Although I think Hollywood Brown and Rashad Bateman could have been a fine tandem with Mark Andrews, neither here nor there, but that you can't get guys to come play there. They couldn't get anybody to come play there.
No. Well, in fact, guys wanted out, to your point.
How can you compete? And Hollywood Brown and Lamar Jackson were boys, and he was like, look, I can't play here.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why this was always going to be, we've said this for 2 years, this was always going to be the trickiest contract negotiation in the sport. For everything that you just laid out, it was made more complicated by the Deshaun Watson bidding war that led to his contract here. All of those things made this such a tough spot for the Ravens. And
yes,
I'm not feeling sorry for them. They've won plenty. But it's a tough spot. And where they go from there is going to be fascinating, and how this gets done, whether it's another team with an offer sheet. The problem is like, how do you know what this, because doesn't have representation, if you are a team that's interested, how do you know what the sweet spot is in terms of what Baltimore's willing to match? That's why to me it seems like the easiest path forward would be some sort of sign and trade where you go to Baltimore and you come up with a package on a trade. That seems easier to me than trying to give up the 2-1s and come up with a number that Baltimore won't match. And so you don't waste time there. It's almost like, hey, Lamar, would you want to play in Indy? Yeah, I would. Okay, Eric DeCosta, this is what we're willing to give you. This is the contract we'll do for Jackson. Here's what we're willing to compensate you for him becoming a member of the Indianapolis Colts. That seems easier to me than, well, we think the number's $180 million guaranteed, so let's try that.
Sure.
You know, like it just seems, what a mess. Speaking of a mess, Cam Newton is going to throw at Auburn's Pro Day. Did you see his tweet? I don't even know where he gets these hieroglyphics that he uses in his tweet. It's unbelievable. It's all Eastern European block is what it looks like to me. The type of the lettering he's using. But he's going to throw at Pro Day. He goes, ain't no way 32 better than me. Like, this is a 30-year-old man going back to a college Pro Day to throw. Former MVP of the league.
And unfortunately for him, like if you look at all the charting and the metrics, he basically has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league for the last few years. Still can affect games with his legs, but I mean his best bet, I think, to be in the league would be to be a backup to Lamar Jackson. You're going to play some games; they can run pretty much the same offense with you.
Yeah, because of
He's
the
not a starting
injuries.
Quarterback.
No, he can't throw it anymore. So because of the injuries, he can't throw it even the way that he used to. I do think there's a little bit of revisionist history where people forget how effective he was as a thrower and the arm strength that he had at certain points during his career, certainly the year that he won the MVP. But when once the injuries happened, he lost that. He lost that arm strength, and so he doesn't have that ability anymore. It's a wild thing. It reminded me a little bit of Phil Jackson saying that he did not want to coach Kobe at the end because he did not want to coach him when he wasn't great, because he didn't know how he would deal with that. Now, Kobe ended up being pretty graceful in terms of the lack of winning, because I think they let him shoot 30 times a game during the end of his career, even as he wasn't as effective. But for Newton, it's hard to imagine any place where he's would come in and be a backup anywhere.
Correct.
And be okay with it.
And that's why he said, I'm better. There's not 32 better than me. That's saying I'm a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So that's it. There are certain people that just aren't wired to be backups.
No. And
he's among them.
He was such a force of personality.
Yeah.
And such a player. One of the most physically intimidating humans I've ever seen on the field. The Texans putting some pieces around the quarterback. They're going to sign at number 2, Dalton Schultz and Devin Singletary getting into the mix there. Texans with 2 pick. What do they pick? Our pick was 13 or 12, and then they have number 2 overall. So that's where that stands in terms of some of the news around the league. A lot of the mock drafts are coming out, and it does. Although Jeremiah has just dropped a second ago, and he still has Bryce Young going number 1.
Really?
Yeah. Mel has CJ going number 1. So we'll have the general on in about 15 minutes. He'll give us a better feel on what the thinking is down in Houston. Of course, they'll have to be reactionary.
Certainly what they want to have happen.
Yeah. They'll have to be reactionary in that.
But I mean, it could be all along that they wanted Bryce Young, and that this whole thing, that this kerfuffle could end up of not being nearly as consequential as we all thought it might be.
What I think is interesting about all of this is going into the combine, you couldn't find anybody who did not say that there was a big gap between Bryce Young and everybody else. And then it was an argument, like, was it Levis or was it Anthony Richardson? But it wasn't like it was automatically Stroud as the number 2 guy. Well, now coming out of it, and I saw McShay with this yesterday, it's now like they're reevaluating their evaluations based on what they heard at the combine. And the one thing that you have to do with Stroud is just look at the Georgia game, and then you go, well, there's everything you need. It's all there. So, to your point, though, it could work out exactly the way Houston wanted all along. They get Young at 2, and Stroud goes number 1 to Carolina, and everything works out the way that you wanted to at that point. Ohio State Pro Day is tomorrow. Marvin Harrison Jr. will be running some routes in that one, so that'll be an attention getter for people, because he's going to be quite highly coveted. CBS Sports ranking the AFC teams after 1 week in free agency. We will get into that coming up next. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Renew your home for the last time with Renew Home Exteriors Siding and Roofing products. Don't spend all day with high-pressure sales guys. The team at Renew Home Exteriors won't waste your day with hours of negotiating the price for your project. Just an upfront fair price to make your project easy. Modernize your home with premium siding ranging in every style and color. Renew Home Exteriors. Superior products, superior service. Visit RenewEstimate.com for more there. CBS Sports ranks the AFC teams after 1 week of free agency. At number 1, your Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. They should be there for a while. I think you make a pretty straightforward argument. They could be better next year than they were last year because all those young kids are going to be a year better and a year more accustomed to the system. They have the Bengals second, Orlando Brown coming in there. Do you have a problem with that? Yep, nope. Seems appropriate to me.
I mean, those two teams have met in the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row. It seems fair that they'd be 1 and 2.
They have the Jets 3, and that's banking on Aaron Rodgers. That seems a little too quick to me, even with Rodgers, right?
Yep, agreed.
They have Buffalo 4. Now, Buffalo's got some things. They lost Tremaine Edmonds. They did pick up a guard, Deontay Hardy, a wide receiver as well. They did get Jordan Poyer to return, but they were the favorite in the NFL going into last season. They have them 4th. I would have them up still.
Can I ask a question? Maybe it's my ignorance. I feel like I know the league fairly well. Who's Deontay Hardy?
I don't know, but they say an intriguing wideout in Deontay Hardy. I don't know what that means.
No idea.
I don't know him either.
Not a clue.
If you didn't know his name, who the hell does?
That's true.
Deontay Hardy.
There we go.
Has been in the league.
Guess the stats?
With the New Orleans Saints. And 2 years ago, he had 36 catches for 570 yards and 3 touchdowns. Last year, he had 2 catches for 13 yards.
There we go. Hustling.
And he made the league as a Pro Bowl punt returner in 2019. But, I mean, there's nothing to suggest
that he would be intriguing.
Going to be an intriguing wide receiver of any type of consequence. He's got, in 4 seasons in the league, 790 yards, 4 touchdowns, and has averaged more than 10 yards a catch in exactly 1 season.
Oh, boy.
Sad. Miami, he's got 5th, or whoever did this has Miami.
So this
5th,
thing, we don't know who's playing quarterback for them.
Yeah, they can't be 5th.
I like their roster.
Yeah, I would have both the Chargers and the Jaguars ahead of Miami, and I would have them ahead of
the
We
Jets.
do know who's playing quarterback in Miami. It's Tua.
Who?
Well, we don't know that because we don't know that he can stay upright.
Okay,
what do you mean?
Like, he's, according to the Dolphins, he's healthy and back and ready to go.
And he was healthy and back on 3 separate occasions last year. And
he is
finished
saying,
the
but
season.
like that's
he's one hit from no career.
I agree.
I mean, he was out. He was out from what, the end of November through the season, through the playoffs.
Yes,
I agree. But I would also say,
I just can't roll the dice on them that high with that health.
Do we know for sure that Aaron Rodgers is still going to the Jets? The longer this drags on.
I mean, I feel pretty.
I think it's Jets or retirement.
Okay. Feels like a win either way for the Packers.
It'll get done. I mean, well, the other thing is he does have the one last play in that he could just force them to give him $50 million and not play for them.
Yeah.
So he has that. He has the final. The Packers have leverage, but he has kind of the ultimate leverage of, fine, I'll just play for you and I'll take my $50 million and I'll just wreck your roster. I would not put that back. I think he is spite. I think Latte Larry weeps in the wake of Aaron Rodgers' spite. I think he would do.
Yeah.
I could see him taking the 50, showing up in September, malcontent. I mean, I think it's all in play. All in play. He's got They got Jaguars 6th with
I'd
Calvin
Jags
Ridley.
and Chargers up.
Me too.
To your point. Yeah.
Baltimore 8. We don't even. You want to talk about? We don't know who their
don't have a
quarterback is. They don't have one.
Yeah.
They really haven't made any.
They've lost everybody.
Either.
They haven't signed.
Here's
anybody.
the other thing. Here's the other thing that I want to point out. We know and got to know Todd Monken from his time here.
Mm-hmm.
You saw what he did at Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it feel like Todd Monken's there to quarterback and coordinate an offense that does not involve that looks more like the elite offenses in the NFL and not like Lamar Jackson's offense?
Yes, which is why I threw out the Tua thing as a sign and trade. as like a bridge sign and trade. Because that's what what Tua ran at Bama is what Todd is going to want to run in the NFL. It's similar to what
for sure.
McDaniel ran
I don't know that
Miami.
I don't think you can run McDaniel's offense with Lamar Jackson.
No, you can't. He'd have to change it.
Which he wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't think. So in terms of some interesting ones, they have Vegas way down at 14. I think Vegas is better than New England. I don't understand any infatuation with New England at all.
Nope, terrible.
They're fourth in that division.
How about McCourty running back what he said a few weeks ago on Good Morning Football and being like, yeah, half the room wanted the other guy.
How could they not? The guy played great.
Yeah. Well, remember, he was adamant about
it. Was a Bailey Zappi, wasn't it?
What's that?
It was a Bailey Zappi.
Bailey Zappi.
We saw firsthand.
What's crazy about this is that
Denver
the top 10
9
teams that we used to be ahead of Denver, but the top 10 teams all feel legit. You never can count the Pittsburgh Steelers out, so that's 11. But then 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 feel like they're pretty far down, and the team that actually has the chance to get good the fastest is probably the Texans.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I would put the Texans behind the Steelers at number 12. Just because of Vrabel, the Vrabel factor and getting the most out of those guys. Are they a playoff team? No.
Yeah, those are road to nowhere. Yeah. New England to me feels like a road to nowhere. Titans feel like a road to nowhere. Vegas feels like a road to nowhere.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing.
They're so just limited.
Vegas, I feel like, could be quite competent.
Well, they could be, but they're also not a contender to me. Does that make sense? Like, it feels like they're, at best, the third team in the AFC West.
Yeah.
Which is a playoff
They didn't
team.
sign anybody defensively.
Well, they got
traded Waller for a bucket of balls.
Robert Spillane.
Yeah. Like, they still they got some room to grow defensively.
You know the key to this whole operation? Because you look at us and you say, gosh, we're better than the 10th best team in the AFC. But it really is the first line of his second paragraph. The play of Deshaun Watson is what will decide Cleveland's season. That's it.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. So nothing else. Where anybody ranks you in any of these things, until people see that, that's where you're at. Is right there. So I would have the top 5: Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Chargers, Jaguars in that order probably.
Yep.
And then Miami, Jets behind them is probably the way I'd go with it.
We could shoot right up to any level that we so desire.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, buddy. Enjoy your afternoon. Appreciate you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The General coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet. Coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, second hour here on Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Time to head on the Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea Hotline, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. For the legend, the General, John McLean, joining us, of course, from GallerySports.com and Sports Radio 610 in Houston. Boy, John, before we get into some of the specifics here, sir, thank you so much for taking the time. It feels like there's like an exchange program between the Texans and the Browns. You get some of our guys every offseason. We get some of yours. There must be a relationship there. Almost every offseason, we can count on it.
And that was before the Deshaun Watson trade.
Yeah.
There just seems to be a pipeline. Right now, the Texans also have one going on with the Cowboys, and as they continue year 3 of their rebuild. But, you guys, I've always liked Jordan Akins. He was a former baseball player with the Rangers. Couldn't hit the curve. Texans drafted him in the 3rd round. And while he never really lived up to being what he could have been, last season he was better than any time in his career. The Giants cut him. The Texans signed him to the practice squad. And they didn't activate him until the middle of October. And Jordan, what he did better than any time in his career was when he got the ball, he outran people. He broke tackles. He's really an H-back or like a big wide receiver because he can move. He'll make an effort to block, but that's not his strength. And he tied his career high with 37 catches, and he set a career high with 495 yards, and he had 5 touchdowns. And he'll be remembered like Lovie Smith for beating the Indianapolis Colts in the last game of the season and costing the Texans the 1st overall pick in the draft.
Yeah. He certainly. When you think of you were around Deshaun for a long time, and obviously there's familiarity with Akins and Deshaun. How important do you think that will be for Watson as he goes through a full off season and a full training camp, knowing that he can play right away?
I think if Jordan plays the way he played last season, over the last 3 months. Watson's going to see a guy he can rely on more because he knows he's going to get yards after the catch. And when I say like breaking tackles, Jordan's like 245. He's 6'4", 245. He's a real good guy, a real good talker too. Always hated here when they get rid of the talkers. And sometimes I think that's why Nick Caserio doesn't bring them back, is because they are good talkers. And he'll see Jordan. I don't know what the deal is, why he ran as well as he did last season, because he's playing with Davis Mills. He's playing with a terrible offensive coordinator, Pep Hamilton, who got fired after 1 season. But when he got the ball, he took off and ran. He had some good runs. He was a fan favorite. Watson played with him for 3 years. And so, that's kind of overrated because if a guy can't play, it's not going to help the quarterback at all. But Jordan turns 31 next month, and he still got it because at 30, he showed it better than any time in his career.
Well, another guy that we're hoping, in terms of a former Texan that has it is Obo Okunrankwo. Bursts onto the scene at the end last season. A lot of people were high on him in the process. We know it's a bit of a projection. Are those projections that you hear and the excitement people hear about and they leave him, is it justified, John?
Well, he had more sacks than Clowney, I'll tell you that. And Obo, who's from Houston, a good guy, they signed him to a 1-year deal. When he got more playing time over the second half, he produced. He had 5 sacks, but that's a part-time role, and then he got the start. And I was kind of surprised they didn't bring him back. They have a budget on him. They don't break the budget. I think if the Browns are looking for a guy to come in passing situations, he's a good one. He's underrated against the run, although he's kind of undersized, weighs about 252, 253, but he gives everything he's got on every play.
Well, that's the idea of playing opposite Miles, I think, is what they're banking on, and that if he gives everything he's got on every play, that'll be a step in the right direction. Do you think that there's a potential where he could turn into an every down guy, John, or is that too much?
I think that's too much.
Okay.
Okonkwo, he's been with the Rams. He was a part-time player. Here he was a part-time starter. And I know that's the role the Browns thought would happen with Clowney, with Myles Garrett getting double-teamed all the time. Clowney would get more sacks. But Jadeveon Clowney as I told you guys after they signed him, he was never a great pass rusher. He was always better against the run. Early in his career, after he had microfracture surgery, he told me one time, he said, everybody talks about me as a pass rusher, but I've always been better against the run. And that was the case. And now, of course, he's bouncing around like a pinball all over the NFL. In retrospect, he should have taken Bill O'Brien's offer here. It was $75 million because they weren't going to pay him and Watt $100 million. Looking back, he probably should have taken it. But Obo's going to, if he's going to put out on every play, he'll make some plays he's not supposed to make. And if he has to start, say, somebody gets hurt half the season, he can do that. Or maybe, based on what he did at the end of last season, maybe he just hit a point in his career where he took that next step, and he can go into the off-season program and training camp and win a job.
Yeah, one of the guys that, Nathan and I on the program here had talked about that we had an interest in bringing in terms of a former Texan was Brandon Cooks, and he got dealt to the Cowboys over the weekend. How competitive were those talks? Were other teams in on it, John? And what would he have helped? Because one thing we're missing here is we got to have somebody who takes the top off the defense. We don't have that right now. Feel like we need it. Watson thrived with a couple of those guys down in Houston. Were the Browns ever in on Cooks at all? And do you think that he would have been somebody that Watson would have loved to have had a little bit of a reconnection with?
Well, he played really well when he played with Deshaun. Since early in his career, he hadn't been the kind to take the top off the defense. And he's small. People wonder why he keeps getting traded. Well, there are legitimate reasons for each of those. When he was in New Orleans, they needed a low one when it came to draft because they wanted offensive tackle Ryan Ramczyk, and he's been a really good player for the Saints. He goes to New England, plays great, beat the Texans with a touchdown in the last second, but they didn't want to give him big bucks because his contract's up, sent him to the Rams, good 1 year, then he had concussions. They were worried, well, he could start having concussion issues, and here he was traded because he was really tight with Jack Easterby. And when they fired Jack Easterby, he wasn't the same guy.
I got you.
And when he wasn't the same player, but he got mad when he didn't get traded to the Cowboys, and he quit on his team. And they missed a couple of games. They took his captaincy away. Then they brought him back. He had his best game, like Akins in the last game at Indianapolis, in which they won.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to be traded to the Cowboys. Nick Caserio did it. He got a 5 this year and a 6 next year. I guess there's other teams that would have given that because Brandon can still play. And I think he was doing Cooks a favor sending him where he wanted to go.
Oh, okay. I see on that. You saw Deshaun firsthand at his best, and one of the things that they're figuring out this offseason is what is the best way to take the talent on our roster and give Watson the best chance for success. When he was at his best, what did it look like down there? And what should Kevin Stefanski and the offensive brain trust here put in to get the most out of him?
When Watson was at his best, he was great. That last season here, he was tremendous. He was started off, he didn't start the first game, came in at halftime, started the second one, primetime Cincinnati, he won. And then he blew out his knee, 3-3 as a starter. He had a phenomenal game at Seattle.
Yeah.
They lost on a last-second Russell Wilson touchdown, and all the defensive players of the Seahawks all said it was the best quarterback had ever played against them. And Richard Sherman said, that's not rookies, that's all quarterbacks. And so then he blew out his knee in practice. He comes back in 18. He showed his toughness. He had a punctured lung, a collapsed lung, broken ribs. He never missed a game. And so people were really endeared to him. They were 11-5. He was terrible in a playoff game. At 19-20, he really took off. And he liked Bill O'Brien. He defended O'Brien when people wanted him fired. Now, he had the luxury of playing indoors here and in good weather in the division, playing in bad weather up there and all games outdoor in the division. I'd be really surprised if he comes close to having the stats that he did here because the conditions were better and the competition was easier than he's got to face. But he is a great quarterback. He's going to be tough. We saw him get kicked in the eye. Arden Key with the Raiders at the time rushed him, and he was going down, and his foot went into Watson's face mask and kicked him in the eye. And Watson looked like he was putting his eye in place while he was rolling out, and actually was moving his face mask, and he threw a touchdown pass. And he showed up afterward, his whole side of his face was swelled up. And then the best play to me that Watson ever made was wild card game against Buffalo here in 2019. He was being blitzed, and two players hit him simultaneously from each side, and somehow he spun out of it, and they both hit him hard, threw a long pass, and they ended up winning on a field goal in overtime. He's tough, and I'm guessing all the legal issues he has, he can compartmentalize them. He hadn't played except for Browns last year after the suspension, since he's had all those off-the-field issues. But when it comes to football, he's respected by his teammates and coaches. He works his tail off, and he's one tough SOB, and he can make plays off schedule, anything you want. But it's going to be tougher for him. People can't expect him to duplicate or surpass the stats here, because where he plays is a whole different animal.
Yeah, certainly is. Talking to the General John McLean from GallerySports.com and Sports Radio 610, joining on the Twisted Tea hotline. All of this momentum, as we go back to the team that you spend your time covering, the Houston Texans, all this momentum for C.J. Stroud at the top of the draft with Carolina, is it possible that Houston might get – is it wrong to think that what they wanted all along was Bryce Young and they might just get him?
Well, first of all, fans and media have wanted Bryce Young here since he beat the University of Texas in Austin early in the season. And CJ, they don't have a clue if he's better than CJ Stroud, the fans and the media here. It depends on what Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans, their new coordinator, Bobby Slowick, what they want. I base it on, having him throw at the combine is a waste of time. Having a pro day, that's like a Broadway play. Mm-hmm. You've been rehearsing for weeks. If you're not great at your pro day, something's wrong. But they go back because the tape doesn't lie, and both of those guys were great. And Young did not have the weapons this season that C.J. Stroud did. Personally, I'd be happy with either one of them. But yesterday, Scott Fitterer and Frank Reich started talking about basically size doesn't matter. In other words, Nick Caserio, we may take Bryce Young. You need to give us your number one pick next year so we can swap places. I do not see Frank Reich going away from his philosophy of quarterbacks because it's documented. He can't deny it.
Yeah.
And going back to when he had Phillip Rivers in San Diego all the way up to 6'5" Matt Ryan last year, every starting quarterback who started regularly was at least 6'3". Did they give up that kind of compensation for a 5'10" and 1/8 quarterback? If they did, then they must think Bryce Young's going to the Hall of Fame.
Well said, sir. If you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about the Houston Cougars, and I'm curious in town.
Sure.
They're the number one seed in the region. Obviously, potentially a matchup with Texas in the regional final, which I think would be incredible if that happened. What does the city of Houston, a monster city like that, what is their, for lack of a better term, give a damn level for Houston Cougars basketball, and how much of that is at the center of this run that they're in right now?
People are eating it up for two reasons. Number one, everybody loves Kelvin Sampson, their head coach. Number two, the Rockets are the worst team again, 3 years in a row. And so we have a basketball team here in the Cougars that has a chance to win it all. My employer at GallerySports.com, Mattress Mac, our furniture salesman and the nation's most renowned bettor, bet on them to win the championship before the season. He did that with Kansas last year and won $15 million. Mm-hmm. Then he won his $75 million with the Astros. So he bet on the Cougars before the season. Everywhere you go, whether it's online, TV, radio, he's got ads telling people, you come out and buy $5,000 worth of furniture of the Houston Cougars, win the championship right here in NRG Stadium, you get that furniture free. And the people just keep coming out buying furniture. Like, he bet $10 million on the Astros, sold $30 million worth of furniture. So if they hadn't won it, he still would have made $20 million. He's a great promoter. So since he is everywhere, you can't turn on anything without him talking about the Cougars. and buying that $5,000 and having a chance to get it free. And so people here are pumped. Right now, the Astros are down about Jose Altuve's broken thumb and might not be here before the middle of June. And then the Texans actually have had nothing but positive pubs since they hired D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah, I would think a Texas-Houston regional final with the right to go to Houston would have quite a bit of juice to it down in your parts. I hope that it plays out that way.
With the Longhorns, it would have been better if they had a chance to meet in the final. The whole 74,000 in the stadium would have been red and burnt orange. I hate burnt orange. I don't mind the red, but as a Baylor guy, I do not want to see burnt orange in the Final Four. We see enough of that stuff everywhere you go in our state.
Sir, it is a great pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoy it as always.
Bo and Jason, my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
That is the great John McLean. He is the general from GallerySports.com and Sports Radio 610. He joined the show via the Twisted Tea hotline, brought to you by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. That's awesome. That's, to think of the perspective of that, and I'm sure he is, because you think about University of Texas and the way that they are in that state and how because you think about it, not only do you have Houston, you got SMU in Dallas, you have Texas Tech, you got Baylor, you got TCU, you got Texas A&M. That's the old Southwestern Conference. All the one you're missing was Arkansas. That's the old Southwestern
They could run
Conference.
their own conference.
They did.
For a while.
For a while they did, and then eventually every single one of them got on probation in the late 80s. They were all cheating with oil money. But good stuff there on the guys that we signed, and we'll see what happens at the top of the draft. I tend to think that he's right, and it feels like most people are coming along that way, that it'll be C.J. Stroud at number 1 and Bryce Young at number 2, and maybe that's the way that it all works out from the Houston perspective on that one. All right, we still got a little higher, lower, a little better or worse coming your way. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. And there's a new way to cheer on your Cleveland Browns with the help of your favorite four-legged companion, Barking Backers, presented by Milkbone, the Browns' newest club for pet parents worldwide. Sign up today at barkingbackers.com. Barking Backers, the fan club for dogs. A couple of minor signings here in the last hour or so becoming official. Matthew Adams comes in to Berea. He is signed via Chicago. He is a linebacker and special teams player on that side of thing. And my internet is so slow, Gibby. Perhaps you could tell me the other one.
I got you. Matthew Adams, his sixth NFL season out of Houston, was originally a seventh-round pick by the Colts in 2018, has appeared in 68 career games with 12 starts. He had 24 stops on special. He's a special teams guy.
Yeah, and then Mike Ford is the corner who comes in from Atlanta.
Yep, and we knew about this yesterday.
Yeah, he's special teams as well.
Undrafted free agent in 2018. Ford played in 61 games, 9 starts with the Lions, 18 through 20, Broncos, and Falcons. Recorded 47 career tackles on defense, 23 special teams tackles. He appeared in all 17 games with the Falcons last year. And again, that I would assume most of those are special teams.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have those guys. I think what everyone is waiting on is that other thing. I know that they're working on it. We know the Goodwin was here in the building yesterday. I did see Mary Kay's report that the Browns preferred Odell Beckham Jr. to DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure. I just don't see how either one of those guys right now is an option.
Well, I mean, Hopkins, I think, would be more of a, known. I mean, Odell is coming off of 2 catastrophic injuries in the last 3 years.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's, who knows he looks great running routes, but who knows what that looks like, what the explosion is on that. I'm for both. I mean, I think, again, it goes back to the conversation Z and I were having, all the weapons. Give me all of them. That's really what's required. Odell sold his house, so he would have to find new place to stay. But, I'm for all of it. Give me all the weapons in the world.
I hate to say it, but I said it last week, be the Bengals.
Yeah.
Surround your quarterback with all the weapons and options that you can get.
Yeah. It's one of those things where when you think about some of it's just dumb luck sometimes. It's the way that the lottery balls, I know there aren't lottery balls in the NFL draft, but it's kind of the way that the balls fall out of the thing there. And the year that Cincinnati drafted one, Burrow was the guy. It was very well known that he was the guy, and if it was anybody else, it was going to be Herbert, and he's a dude too. And then in the next draft, Jamar Chase is available, so you're able to, and you pick high enough. Now, it was funny, as you recall, so many people at that time were like, Penei Sewell, you got to protect Burrow, Penei Sewell. Burrow got hurt as a rookie, you got to protect him. And I'll never forget talking to Laurinaitis about this, and he goes, look, dude, we never game planned for a left tackle.
He's right.
If I got to deal with a receiver like that, then that changes the way that we attack things defensively. So there's so much talk about, the O-line and all of that, and, especially around here in town. We got to get more protection up. No, what you need is weapons. You need things that make defenses change the way that they play.
If you have the weapons and you have the talent offensively, linemen want to come play for you. Look at Orlando Brown.
Yeah, and that's
he
just
took
after
less money.
Lael Collins last year went there to play. So you can patch meal that together as long as you've got the quarterback and the weapons. We've got the quarterback. We've got some weapons. We just need some more to be able to consistently have those conversations. So,
yeah.
Right.
And I get it. People are like, what do these moves mean? Like, you're building the back end of the roster. You're building with solid special teams guys, a special teams unit that needed some help.
You've got a new special teams coordinator who might have some things that he wants out of certain positions that maybe Coach Preef didn't want. So you're working that out. And the other thing is, and when you were off last week, Z and I talked about this a little bit, and I think that we did a pretty good job here on the show of setting the groundwork, laying the groundwork for what this free agency was going to be.
Manage the expectations.
There were a lot of people out there throwing around Jesse Bates and all of this stuff, and it was like, no, that was never in play. You're already compensating your best players. You can't pay Jesse Bates $16 million a year to play safety. That was never going to be the case. So I think we did a pretty good job of understanding the cap, understanding the constraints of it. And you can renegotiate Watson, but you still have to pay for all of this, and it's got to all fit under. And so you can't go – this isn't like when we had Baker on a rookie deal and Denzel on a rookie deal, and we hadn't even paid Miles yet, and we're spending like crazy. This isn't where we are. We are about being smart, finding guys like Obo who you hope can take a big leap opposite Miles, and building the roster that way. So that's where this thing is. But as we talked about earlier, like job one is Watson back to Watson levels. That's really
that's what it comes down to.
Also build a dome. My words, not anyone else's, but you heard John McLean. Like, Deshaun Watson's going to be here 10 years. Put a roof on the thing.
Yep.
I mean,
it would be helpful.
That's the operation we got to get done there. All right, we'll do a little better or worse, higher or lower. Poisal in studio with us coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet. Coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Let's have a little higher, lower. AP in studio. How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic, Bo.
Flurry of signings.
Yeah. It's been a lot of them so far. I feel like compared to past years, but a couple big free agent names today, or say special teams names. That's what I meant to say. Special teams names today. It seems like Bubba has given a few recommendations out to AB, and they're bringing in a couple guys who have been studs on that side of the ball for him. So, like Matthew Adams, he spent his first 4 years in Indy when Bubba was the special teams coordinator there. Yeah. So I would imagine that had something to do with the team bringing him in. It seems like things are trending in the right direction on in that department.
We said there were a couple of guys signed over the weekend as well. Kanashik brought back, and you were looking at some of those signings, and people would say, who cares? Just special team guys. Like, look, you got a new special teams coordinator.
Yeah, who
might want something else out of certain positions than Preef wanted,
and he's brought in because they're just trying to make that side of the ball better, and so it makes sense that it's still early in free agency, but that's been more of a priority, I think, for the front office this year is let's get guys in who have been, also established tacklers as gunners and all the other special teams positions, and I think that's what they did today. So it's definitely not going to be the biggest news of our offseason, but it's still good to see that they're working hard at improving a department that needed some help last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Gibbe.
Hi, boys.
How you doing?
Oh, I keep thinking it's First Friday, but it's only Tuesday.
I had
that's never a good thing.
So I'm flying at 5:30 Saturday morning with the family. That's the best we could do. So we're flying 5:30 Saturday. I was talking to former NFL player Bobby Carpenter this morning, and he told me that on his flight back from spring break, he was in the Bahamas, and it started, you start losing it. And you're like, we're not making this connection. This is going to work. And they're like, look, you're going to be stuck in the Bahamas for 3 more days, which is fine. I mean, there are worse places to be stuck. Or we can get you to Miami, and you can get stuck there. Or we might be able to get you to Philly, and then you can drive or find a flight from Philly, and he lives in Columbus, to fly over. And he had the 2 boys with him. His wife and daughter were on another flight, so they were already home. And he's like, "Get me to Philly, and we'll deal with it." And that was the way. But this is I'm going to be in a mess. It's a lock. It's a lock.
It's
like
not
spring
direct.
break disasters. It's going to be a disaster.
We're
going through Dallas.
Oof. Oh well.
That's better than Chicago this time of year. You can't
Correct.
do Chicago this time of year. So it's better than Denver this time of year. Minneapolis is the only northern airport I trust, but you can't fly here to there anymore. That's out. You always got to go through Detroit.
Really?
It's a 2-hopper.
I did not even know that.
You got to go to well, there's like a couple of flights a week, but used to be anytime you went west on Delta, you'd go Minneapolis. Now a lot of times they'll make you go Detroit, Minneapolis, and then.
Yeah, I mean it's awful. I was lucky enough from our golf trip last week. Me and another guy, the official animal warden of the show.
Yeah.
He and I were on a direct on Spirit, but one of our friends had a layover in Atlanta. One had to spend
go to Vegas.
Yeah,
wow.
Vegas
Yikes.
to Atlanta to Cleveland.
Yeesh.
Another one had to spend 2 hours in Detroit. I'm like, you should have just driven home. But he's like, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't even know what time zone it is currently, and there's no way I could even drive. Everybody had a layover.
Yeah. It's really hard to fly out of here now.
It's awful to fly out of here.
It's tough. Yeah, it used to be. I've heard people who live over by me, some of them drive to Pittsburgh, and I've heard people who live on the west side will go to Detroit and try to do it that way.
Yep, Detroit is great to fly in and out of.
Yeah.
And you can fly anywhere.
I wonder how Canton Akron is. Akron-Canton, I guess.
Just depends. Again, a lot of those are the value air carriers. I love flying Spirit or Frontier out of Cleveland when I go to Fort Myers. It's 2 hours. I can make myself comfortable for 2 hours.
Yeah. It's
Any
amazing
more
you've
than
never
that.
had issues either. Right?
It's a direct flight.
Yeah, you can't. Usually you can't screw that up.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're going south, you can get a lot of good deals out of the Akron-Canton Airport. I had a buddy that flew in from Charleston from that.
And that's
too.
what he did?
It was painless.
Yeah.
So it's just you're not flying the major airline carriers, but it's one of the lower ones. But if you have enough trust in that for just to go south on it, like Gibbs was saying, a quick flight, it's a pretty good deal.
Quick flight's fine. I had a little angst with the whole
Well,
to
it's
Vegas
like anything
back.
though. Like if you miss a flight, and so with me, I'm flying with 5. If I miss a flight, if you miss a flight, and it's you and the missus, that's 2 seats.
Yep.
You can usually find 2 seats.
Yeah.
You miss a flight with 5, you're done, man.
You're breaking it. You're breaking
because
up
everything's
the party.
oversold. There is no path forward there. Let's go rent a car. And by the way, I've done the math. 17 hours from Dallas if I have to drive.
No thanks.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. A little higher or lower. Compliments of Dan Hansis, NFL.com, post-free agency power rankings. Not really post-free agency, but a week into it. Let's go with that. He called it post-free agency, but I said, well, we're still well underway into this. First and foremost, the Cleveland Browns come in at number 21. The Panthers, Packers, and Rams in front of the Browns. Behind the Browns, the Saints, Raiders, Tampa. Poisel, higher, lower, or just right?
Yeah, I'm going higher here and better. Just because all the teams that you mentioned that are in front of the Browns right now, I would move the Browns up in front of them.
They got the Patriots 17.
Yeah, I mean that feels a little high too.
18. Come on.
I'm like the Panthers don't have a quarterback right now. The Packers don't have a quarterback right now. The Rams, they've got a quarterback, but he's old and was also hurt for most of last year.
The Rams are a mess.
So I shouldn't say the Packers don't have a quarterback. They do have Jordan Love, but we still don't know a whole lot about what he's going to be able to do with them. So, yeah, I'm moving the Browns up to, I guess it would be number 18 on this list. Still, I mean, small potatoes, all things considered, right? But that's where I'd put them based on those 3 teams in front of the list. I don't know why Panthers, Packers, Rams all deserve a spot in front of them right now.
Bishop.
Yeah, I mean, that's a joke.
It's
Panthers
the Patriots
and Rams
are 17. Why are we hung up on that?
I think the Patriots are going to suck.
Yes.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I the Panthers are, they're completely rebuilding. The Rams are completely rebuilding. Heck, they could trade Aaron Donald by the time this thing's all said and done. And that, honestly, they might be smart to do so. Yeah, we should be at – here's the deal, though, man. It's hard to have beef because of how it looked for 6 games.
Yep.
Right? We had this stretch against Washington that you went, okay, that was in the brochure, and you had moments every game where you went, gosh, that's why. But you really need to see it stack. And so anytime somebody puts us 21 or whatever, you say, well, gosh, we know we're better than that. But at the same time, people got to see it.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years,
Next.
Higher or lower?
We are presented by our great friends at the Ohio Lottery. Back to the top of the board. Kansas City is number 1. Number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, behind them, the Bengals at 3, the Bills at 4. Bishop, Eagles, higher, lower, or just right?
Well, they can't be higher than Kansas City. Obviously, they that's appropriate. I think it's probably the sweet spot for them. I think that the Bengals got better with Orlando Brown, and they will get better through draft. They have their picks. They're going to sign Burrow to a long-term extension after the 1st of April. They'll get that thing locked in. So the Bengals will be better. But I'm fine with Philly being here. I'm surprised Philly was able to retain all the guys they did. I thought it would be a bigger mass exodus there. But we've talked about this before on the show. There is some appeal with playing in Philly for NFL guys. There's juice to that place. They love playing there for whatever reason. And they've had success, so I guess that's part of it. But even before they won the Super Bowl, before they got to the Super Bowl this year, free agents would come to Philly 15 years ago. They just liked playing there.
Poisel?
Yeah, that's a good point, Bo. I think, just making the Super Bowl, even if you don't win, will get you a lot of slack in these kind of, off-season power rankings. And, yeah, things looked maybe a little bit bleak for the Eagles there, just because they had so many guys on that defense who were going to be free agents, and they lost some of them. Javon Hargraves is one of them. T.J. Edwards is another. But they still were able to, get back a lot of good guys like Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Fletcher Cox, even though he's definitely one of the older players in the league nowadays. He had a great season last year. So I'm fine with where the Eagles are at. I'm fine with them still being ahead of the Bengals for sure, just because I think the Bengals, they also, are missing a couple guys from their defense still. I don't see any problem with putting the Eagles at number 2 here, and that's probably where they'll stay for most of this offseason.
Next.
Higher or lower?
All right, the Bengals were 3, the Bills 4. It takes us to number 5. Still not sure what the quarterback situation looks like, but we know the rest of the team's pretty darn good. The San Francisco 49ers are number 5. Poisel, higher, lower, or just right? By the way, the Cowboys and Jags follow up the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't put the 49ers behind the Cowboys or the Jags, so I'm fine with this too. It's just, I feel like we've never really known where to slot this team most of the time in that top tier because of that QB situation. And so that makes 5 almost fitting. Like, yeah, they're still most likely going to be a very good team, but we're, again, like, in an offseason where we're not really sure who they're going to have under center in week 1 next year. It might be Sam Darnold, and with the way things look with Brock Purdy, maybe if he gets that opportunity, Sam Darnold, then maybe he has a career year or a career start. I don't know. But until we get more clarity about who their QB is, they're not going to be in that like top 3 in these kind of power rankings, I don't think.
Bishop.
Who's 8? The internet's so slow I can't get it to
Number
work.
8 is Chargers.
So they have Chargers 8.
Number 9, the New York Football Jets, and number
Baltimore,
10, the Dolphins.
Baltimore's 13, Dolphins 10.
I feel like the Dolphins or the 49ers are almost in the same boat. You don't know what the quarterback. The rest of the team's loaded.
That's right where I was going.
Sorry.
So I really like. No, you said it more eloquently than I could. I think the problem with San Francisco is, look, we have this overwhelming belief in Kyle. We have an overwhelming belief in their weapons, in their system, in their defense, and all of it. But it's not even Brock Purdy. Like, he's coming. So he's coming off a major injury. They've got Darnold. Like, they still have Trey Lance that they've got to sort out in some way. I don't know what the plan is there. Are they punting on Trey Lance?
It sure feels that way.
Is that what's going on? Like,
that's what I'm
they
saying.
Nobody
knows.
I have no idea what they're
situation
doing. It's just such an overwhelming belief in Kyle. Like, like in my gut, I think well, let's do this. Would you rather own, like, if you could own one of these teams, I'd rather own Jacksonville and the Chargers. Not in terms of the value of the franchise, but in terms of buying into the future of the roster. Give me Lawrence, give me Herbert, more than a bunch of really talented skill players.
Feels like they have more sustainable rosters.
It's far more. It's just such a huge bet on Kyle and his brilliance, and not the position that it's really, really important. But I think it's probably fine. All that to be said.
Which that's like what we've been saying about the Niners all year.
Like, what are you going to do?
Higher or lower?
All right, so we've gone through the top 10, and I still think the Jets are overvalued. But I want to go to number 11 because we're up against it. The Detroit Lions come in at number 11. They've had themselves a nice little off season here so far. Bishop, higher, lower, or just right? FYI, the Giants are 12, the Ratbirds are 13, the Seahawks 14, and the Squealers are 15.
10 is Miami.
Yes, and the Jets are number 9.
I think Detroit. It's right about where they should be. I think you can make an argument if you want to that they would be as high as ahead of the Jets right now because the Jets are too high. They do not have Aaron Rodgers. So right now they don't have a quarterback. So if you want to say to yourself, fine, the Jets with Rodgers are 9, I think that's appropriate. Right now they don't have him. So the Jets need to come down. Like, Jets need to be down in the teens, middle teens somewhere, 15 to 20.
Thank you for saying that.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
We need to stop pretending that that's official.
It's not done. Like, get it
done.
done.
Not done.
Get it done, and then fine. Put them 9. But they're not 9 now. So I like Detroit better than them right now, and I like them better than Miami right now because of I don't think you could ignore Tua's health. They're like the third best team in the NFC, Detroit.
Yeah.
They might be.
I was going to say, I think you could even
Maybe
move
fourth?
Detroit up in front of Miami, maybe.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
I think you could make the argument for the Jets too. Like, people seem to be forgetting a little bit how hot they finished the season. I think the last time I was here and we were talking about the Lions a few weeks back, I was like, this team finished like 8-2 to end the year.
Yeah,
and
they won at Green Bay playing for nothing.
Exactly.
To stick it to them.
Yeah, and
I love that.
I love it too. I'm still really excited about the Lions. They, like you said, Gibbs, they've had a great free agency so far. They've got good draft picks coming too. I like where the Lions are. I think I'd probably put them at number 10 at the highest. I don't know. They can be inside the top 10.
Yeah. All right. Good job out of you. Good job out of you, Gibby.
Yes,
so
sir.
much more to come. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Bally Bet, coming soon to Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Did you watch any hoops last night, Kibe?
I did not.
You know, I watched a little bit of the women's tournament. Buckeyes won on a buzzer beater.
Nice.
And Miami beat Indiana.
I read about that this morning.
Yeah. Well, those two twin girls make the most money of any athletes in college athletics on NIL. The Cavinder girls, they play for Miami, and they're good. The one second team All ACC, but they're the wealthiest NIL people out there. So yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, indeed. All right, we are back tomorrow. The next level is coming up next. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland.